Are you tired of spending your time and money chasing strategy after strategy only to discover what worked 10, 5, or even 2 years ago is not working now? Things shift fast in the online space, and if you're not keeping up, you're getting left behind. It's time for something different. Welcome to the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast, where every single episode will be jam-packed with proven, profitable strategies, behind-the-scenes secrets, and what's working now resources from industry experts and global influencers to help you scale your business, shorten your learning curve, and stand out in a crowded, noisy marketplace. And now, your host, award-winning marketing and media strategist, and international speaker, Patty Farmer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Marketing, Media, and Money Podcast. I'm really looking forward to sharing another amazing industry expert with you today. And I would really love to introduce you to Michelle Nicole McNabb, professionally known as Michelle Nicole. She's an event marketing and sponsorship advocate and began her career over 10 years ago in logistical event planning and event marketing. And with 7 years in corporate America, she developed event marketing and sales campaigns and trading nationwide. As she managed dozens of event campaigns, she recognized there was a gap in the industry for companies to best leverage the events and be successful beyond the logistics. So she combined her event planning and event marketing strategies to open M&E Marketing and Events, and now consults and trains internationally on optimizing event sponsorship and event results to maximize marketing and sales ROI. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being here with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm excited for our conversation.
I am really excited about it as well. I have to tell you, as an event producer, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So for those of you that are listening, we're going to get down and dirty and be talking about events and strategies and sponsorships. And so make sure you have a pen and paper. There's going to be a lot of writer-downers, so to speak. So let's just get going. So Michelle, let's just really start with what I believe is really, really important is the customer journey, right? So when people go to an event, right, whether they're an attendee, no matter what, there is a whole journey that they go on before, during, and after the event. So could you define that event customer journey for us?
Absolutely. So this is something that I touch on. It's actually one of my 7 objectives that we talk about when using events as a platform. And the easiest way to break down the customer journey would be before, during, and after. But then it's a matter of understanding not only the process, but then what tactics we may want to use, because even if our process is the same, we always have a before, a during, and after an event. But what makes events so unique and makes each event different from one customer journey to another would be the tactics that we choose to use, whether that be digital, social media, email marketing. And so really understanding what goals we want to accomplish before, during, and after. Although the process, and I talk about this a lot in my trainings, is the same, we want to best identify why are we using the event as a touch point. And think of as events as a platform similar to a Facebook or a YouTube or a platform to deliver your message. We can better identify how we're going to use that event and where does it fit in the customer journey. So is the event in the beginning of the customer journey and we're using it for lead generation, or using that event as a platform for a cold market? Or are we using the event towards the end of the customer journey and these connections are a warm market and we're actually looking to use the event to close? Or is the event just meant to build credibility? So first understanding why have the event, and then understanding where the event is along that customer journey can help us really understand why and how we can best optimize that event.
I think that makes a lot of sense because a lot of people, like you said, they do events for different reasons. Sometimes you have a mastermind or they're already your client, and then an event is part of the package, so to speak, right? And it may happen in the beginning, in the middle of the mastermind, or at the end of the mastermind. I know a lot of times, even myself, when people are part of a program, and there's many different ones, but if they are, events are a huge part of that. But then also, sometimes we use events to attract our ideal clients for the different things that we do. So I absolutely love that you actually said that. One of the things that I think is really important is to dispel myths, right? And to talk about things that people shouldn't do just as well as things they should do, right? So I always think that's important. And one of the biggest things that I believe is a mistake that people make when they're hosting events is that they're not really clear about who they should market to. Because one of the things I have to tell you, my biggest pet peeve is when I hear people talk about putting butts in seats. So that just drives me crazy, because I really believe it isn't about putting butts in seats. It's about putting buyers in seats, right? So who is your target buyer? And so a lot of times what happens is, whether you're a speaker, an exhibitor, whatever the case may be, sometimes the reason why they're not happy with the ROI they get is because people pretty much did that spray and pray model, or they did spaghetti marketing. They just threw everything at the wall and hoped it'd stick, instead of really doing what is super important about knowing who your ideal client is. And just like when you know who your ideal client is for somebody to hire you, that's kind of sort of what an event is as well. Who is your ideal client from a sponsorship point of view, an exhibitor point of view, or the people that are attending? So how do you feel about that?
I could not agree more. And that is something that comes up quite often. Or people ask, Michelle, can you help promote this event or get butts in seats? And I also clarified that's not necessarily my intention. And that's where an advertising agency may come in. But a great advertising or promotion agency will help you through that. And going back to what I call my 7 C's of event objectives, and I help to clarify this in a way where, if you are using the event for lead generation or to convert into sales, right? So that's the objective of the event. Then we want to better understand what is the conversion of your outreach into leads, into sales. And by having a very clear niche and target audience and having that room filled with those people, I would much rather have an event that converts at a higher ratio than having more butts in seats with a lower ratio. And to do that is really defining your messaging, who you want to be there, why they should be there, and then having that very strong conversion from how many people are in the room to actually ideal people that are going to buy, versus just getting people to be there and they're bringing their moms and their aunts and whoever else just to fill the room. That actually is more effort, more time, resources, and they're not who you really want in the room. Is actually going to decrease and hurt that conversion ratio altogether.
I think it also can hurt your reputation as an event host too, if you're bringing in speakers. So if you're bringing in speakers from somebody who hosts events and from somebody who travels all over the world speaking, that is super important to me. And I look and speak to them when they invite me to speak. I want to know who the other speakers are and who is going to be in the room. And
absolutely,
one of the big reasons for that is, and let's kind of break it down and then tell me your perspective, is that if there's 100 people in the room and I do marketing and all the other speakers in some way, shape, or form serve the same market as me, while yes, people only have a certain amount of discretionary income, that's kind of your job then, is to be talking to the people who need your services. However, you are talking to 100 people in the room. If, however, they have someone who does marketing and somebody who does spiritual healing and somebody who does, just because they want to appeal to everybody, then the bottom line is, when you get there as a speaker, you may only be talking to 20 people who are actually your market. So I think it's really, really important from a speaker point of view. I have a lot of speakers who listen to this podcast, to really know who is in the audience. But as someone who's considering doing events, or as someone who does produce events, if they are listening, it is really important when you're picking your speakers and also to really know who is it that you want to be in the room, and know that it isn't about, can you just get a whole bunch of people to come and speak for you, even if they say they'll speak for you for free, may not actually be the best move for you.
Absolutely. And that's actually something that I talk about in determining if the opportunity is worthwhile, and to identify those sort of things from the very beginning. And target audience is a big part of that, because even if you are just starting out or getting on podcasts, there are so many opportunities out there that do serve your target audience, that even if you are speaking for free, or if you're the organizer looking for speakers, then to build that reputation, like we mentioned, a big part of it is to make sure that they align. And a big break that I see with organizers, speakers, exhibitors, sponsors is exactly that. The intention of the event itself and the target audience actually don't align, and they're just looking to fill that table. They're just looking to fill the stage. They're just looking to fill that seat, rather than building that foundation, being that both parties or all parties align, not only in their target audience, but their objectives. And for instance, if someone wants to build lead generation, or they're converting to sales, but they don't have the opportunity to build their list or offer something at the event, then those sort of things aren't aligning, whether it's their target audience or the objectives. And really honing in which events can serve that purpose on both parties, I think, is a really big indicator from the very beginning that can be avoided when selecting opportunities and your speakers as an event host.
I love that. So I'm going to go back to that myth again, and then I'm going to ask you yours. So one other thing that I believe also is, just like when we are attracting our ideal client, if you were going to go out and look for sponsorship and you want people to sponsor you, one of the mistakes I see a lot is that they don't think of that person as essentially their ideal client, right? And so what I see happen a lot is they create these sponsorship decks, right, or these packages, and then they go out and they try to find sponsors. And so basically what they're doing is they're trying to find sponsors and then putting that sponsor into their packages, rather than doing what we know we should do with ideal clients, and know that first we need to know what is the problem that they have and what's the solution that we could offer. So whether it's your ideal client or an ideal sponsor, we still need to think of that person as an individual and what are their problems and what is our solution, rather than creating a sponsorship deck and sending it out to everybody and trying to find somebody who likes that. So I know this is something that you really do too. So I just talked about two specific mistakes that are ones that just drive me absolutely batty. So I'd like to get your perspective on that. And also, what are some of the mistakes that you see people do all the time when they're out there looking for sponsors?
Yeah, this is definitely a trigger point that happens a lot in the industry. I actually just did a YouTube video on this as well this past week, because it's such a heavy topic. And I went through the 7 different things to consider when finding event sponsors. So I don't need to list them all out here on the podcast, but let's touch a couple of those. One being those packages that you mentioned. And really, the event sponsors, right? If you are looking for event sponsors, event exhibitors, they're not walking into their office every day and acknowledging themselves as quote unquote an event sponsor, right? So to first understand who are these decision makers, and typically we find them under roles such as sales development, business development, marketing managers, the president, right? And so once we can first understand who they are, because like I mentioned, if you're finding them on LinkedIn or connecting with them, they need to first understand that their goals, if your event can align with them and who you're first looking for, you're not seeking necessarily event sponsorship. What you're looking to do is provide a solution to these decision makers, your event being the solution. And to do that, just like any high ticket sale or to your client that you have an offering, is to go through that discovery phase, to have the opportunity to have a conversation with that decision maker. As you mentioned, very similar as you would with a client. And so that is the first thing that I'm seeing, is people are putting this sponsorship deck together. They have a gold, silver, bronze perspective packet together, and then pushing them out, whether it be by email or, mail or whatever it may be, that cold reach. And they're losing that opportunity to even have that conversation to see if it aligns. So that would be number one, is understanding who it is that you're looking for, who the decision maker is, and at least having the opportunity to have that conversation if your goals and your event even align with what they're looking for. And then secondly would be, well, how do you approach them? And that's another area that we talk about, is when we pitch too soon, you're giving that offer too soon to your client, we're leaving a lot of that opportunity on the table. And that's exactly what I see is happening with seeking event sponsors or exhibitors, is we're pitching too soon before we really have the opportunity to know or listen to that prospect, essentially, if we can be a solution for them and if it is a good alignment. So does that help kind of elaborate my standpoint on some of the mistakes as to pitching too soon and why we're doing that, and really finding the right people and how to go about approaching them just as you would any high ticket offer or opportunity with a client? These sponsors and exhibitors are looking for that opportunity and using your event as a platform to do so.
I love that. So we talked a little bit about these mistakes and myths, and you've referred a few times to these stages that you have. So let's just go right there, because I'm sure my audience is going, well, tell us about the stages, right? So let's do that. So I know you said there's 6. So can you just pretty much briefly take us through the 6 stages and kind of elaborate a little bit on what each one does?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I work with clients and events, I use what I call the 6 foundations, and I go through strategy, logistics, the outreach, the nurturing, the sales, and the metrics. And if you have anything to do with business development or marketing, those terms are going to sound familiar. And they're not exclusive to events, but my role in the industry is using those and optimizing the results by understanding what I call the broken bridges within each of those foundations specific to your event. And yes, you can use those 6 foundations, let's say in other areas of your business or your entire marketing plan. But to optimize event results, there are steps and tasks and checklists and things to consider within each of those stages. And again, that starts with strategy, the logistics, your outreach, your nurturing, your sales, and the metrics. And why those 6 are so important is with my background starting in logistical event planning, and I absolutely am grateful for all the logistical planners out there, making sure that negotiations and venues are selected, and what coffee we're going to have, and what time does the coffee come out, and what time do the speakers go on, are very logistical. So logistics is who needs to be where and when, what needs to be where, how does it get there, right? However, that alone is very critical for a successful event, but it is not everything to create a successful event when you're using it as a marketing platform or a sales platform. And that's why logistics are important, to have that right team for the logistics stage. But to have a successful event is to pull all those 6 foundations together to have your strategy, then have your logistics, and make sure then we have our outreach strategy. What marketing, how are we communicating and connecting with our audience? What nurturing sequences do we have before, during, and after? What is the sale? What is the ask? How are we measuring that ROI all together? Because the type of coffee we have is not going to generate the ROI itself. And then the metrics, what's working, what's not working. That way we can go back to the drawing board, really debrief, and use that metric, all the metrics really, and use it to optimize our results.
I love the way you did that and broke it down. I think that's really important. I actually really love the idea that you're going to share that YouTube video with my audience, and I know they're going to want to have it. And for those of you that are on the call right now, just so that you know, at the very end, she is going to give away something that is going to make your day. So you want to make sure that you stay for that. So I have to say that I think that one of the things that's really important when you're doing an event, so from a sponsor point of view, from a exhibitor point of view, and from the host point of view, understanding who the ideal client is and what they need is kind of something that sometimes people get confused about. And because they're not clear on that, their event is not as good for them. They don't get the best ROI no matter which player they are in the process. So could you give us a little bit of insight and some tips in how they would understand who the ideal client is and what they need?
Sure. So when it comes to defining your own target audience, a lot of times we generalize, right? And I use this example quite often. If your target audience are moms, right? This is an easy one. I'm actually not a mom, but I use it as an example. I find that it's very easy to illustrate. So your target audience is moms, and you say that you can help all the moms out there, right? How to better break that down, similar to when we talked about event sponsors, how do they identify themselves? And if you can better understand not only their demographics, but break down their lifestyle and what type of mom are they? And so you have the mom, let's say, that has 3 children and they're running around, they're the typical soccer mom, and they're always on the go, and she's stay-home mom. Then you have, let's say, an entrepreneur mom who has 1 child, but she travels quite a bit, and she's always on the go. Then you may have a single mom working a job or 2 and trying to make ends meet, right? So you have the different types of moms, and to understand, well, let's say that you help them find clarity and find how to find that work-life balance, right? And so the mom that's always on the go, working, traveling, she may have a need that she wants to better balance how to have that quality time with her children and work, because she loves both, but she's always on the go. And maybe that's a struggle point versus, let's say, a soccer mom. And, I'm using these terms at a very vague level. Typical, right? Soccer mom who's always carpool mom. She's spending a lot of time with her children, and she loves that time, but maybe she needs a little balance for herself. And what is she looking for? And so these are all moms. Then we have, let's say, a single mom who is working 2 different jobs. So she loves her children and her work, but she's looking for something different. So why I like using this example is who is the target audience, and understanding, okay, yes, they are all moms, but having the opportunity to ask what they need, and not just assuming that they all want work-life balance, right? But how they want that and what their goals are and what their situation is. So then being able to break it down even further. And that can be in business. That could be many different target audiences, but how do they identify themselves, and having that opportunity to break that down rather than just only saying, oh, I can help anyone and anybody and they're all moms. So I hope that kind of helps to break down one target audience, but then to segment by asking those questions of what they are looking for, what their goals are, and how you can help them based on their situation, and how they identify themselves.
I think that's very, very important. So Michelle, I know that your niche is really in helping exhibitors and sponsors to use events as a full-blown marketing campaign opportunity. And I think a lot of times anybody who hosts events or is a speaker, right, or has ever done a sponsorship before, we think about the sponsor a lot. But the reality really is people who exhibit, while they may not be speaking at the event, or maybe the event isn't even an event that has speakers, right? There are expos and all type of things where really it is exhibitors, right? And people don't think about sponsorship there. So what are some of the ways that you help exhibitors and sponsors use events as a marketing campaign opportunity? So what are some things that you do to help them?
Well, let's first talk the outcomes that come from it. And then if we want to dive deeper, you let me know how you want to steer the conversation, maybe on some of those tactics. But some of the outcomes that we gain from using events as a platform and what they're looking for from exhibiting and sponsoring is a couple different things. But the common ones would be to build their credibility, to be seen in their industry, to connect with decision makers and ideal prospects, to be able to be introduced to key referral partners. Not everybody that we meet at expos are a prospect. A lot of times we can meet other strategic partners, get invited to VIP opportunities with the right connections, and your network and building credibility play a really big role in events themselves. And being able to increase what I call the conversion from the leads to deals. And what they're looking to do is using that event as a touch point, right? And so digital and the virtual space has really enabled us to expand our brands and extend our reach. But events still are such an effective way to actually move people through that customer journey that we talked about in the very beginning. And so to help people use that event effectively, and if you are at a multi-day event, to have that opportunity to meet face-to-face and move people through that customer journey is more likely to happen face-to-face and at an event. You're more likely to move people to action if you've already optimized some of the other touch points. And so that's really the outcome of using events. And then how we go about that is something that we can discuss further, or, if we want to extend on the conversation. But how we do that, again, it breaks down in those 6 foundations. What are we doing in our outreach? What makes sense in the nurturing? How are we doing that? How are we building credibility? What podcasts are we getting on? Who are we being connected with before the event? How are we meeting and identifying and qualifying if they're a prospect or if they're a key referral partner? Building those relationships. So those are some of the outcomes that we emphasize using events, and how we do that are through the different tactics. And I call tactics as in the different ways that are going to align best with your brand and your personal brand or your corporate brand, whatever it may be. How are we going to do that? Which platforms do we use? What's the messaging? Is how we're going to be able to build that credibility and really connect with the best people that you're looking to connect with, so we can move them through the customer journey.
So when we're thinking about that, so again, we have sponsors, and there are always sponsors that are in-kind sponsors. There are sponsors that are there at your event, and then there are sponsors that are not even there at your event. And then you have exhibitors, and those exhibitors may or may not be speakers. It could be an event where you don't have speakers, like I said earlier. So there's a lot of different options, right? So because we don't have time to break down every single one of them, but let's just kind of simplify it a little bit. What would you say would be a great strategy or thought process when approaching event sponsors or exhibitors and really wow them? Like, what could we say that's like, wow, nobody's ever asked me that question before, and thank you so much for asking it, right? So how would we approach them and wow them, really, sponsors and exhibitors?
Couple things. So before we even pitch the deal, just asking them for the opportunity to understand their goals and what their objectives are before you even pitch how amazing your event is and why they should be a part of their event. How do we know that if we haven't even taken the opportunity to listen what their goals are, rather than, as I mentioned a few moments ago, just approaching them as, oh, wow, we are amazing, and this is our fabulous event, and this is why everybody should be a part of it, and assuming that your cookie cutter package is what they're looking for. And so to go about wowing them is really going to be that first impression from the get-go. And to have that opportunity, and then you may have your standard packages. Everybody gets a table, everybody gets logo, everybody gets a social media shout out, right? That's okay. But to first list out a menu of what I call deliverables, how can you deliver what they're looking for? And then having that opportunity and really working with them to align what they're looking for. And that's something that isn't necessarily happening, where a lot of people just have these cookie cutter packages and aren't necessarily listening. So first and foremost is to hear what their goals are, and then not even pitch them if it's not aligned, right? Because having that opportunity to see and how can you customize that experience and build a relationship, because these sponsors and exhibitors can actually be some of your loudest influencers, more so than attendees, if they're in your industry. And having that relationship first and foremost by putting them first and their goals rather than the goals of your own event. Yes, that's critical. Yes, that's important. But at the same time, to have the wrong exhibitor or the wrong sponsor can actually hurt that credibility, hurt the event when they're walking around the floor saying, oh, wow, I can't wait for such and such competitor event. I hear that often because then they feel as though the event doesn't work. They feel as though it's not the right place, rather than having that conversation and approaching them a lot differently than everybody else in the market, which is, oh, well, we assume that this is exactly what your marketing needs are. So that would be my suggestion, is to have that conversation first before pitching them and before proposing that cookie cutter option to them.
Love that. So Michelle, what would your advice be, if you just could give like one piece of advice really to a brand new entrepreneur, business owner, or speaker that's never really used events at all as a marketing strategy? So what would your advice be to them? Because, you know, they hear and see all kinds of things, but, you know, if they were just like a newbie and this was their very first time they were going to tip their toe into events in any way, shape, or form, what kind of advice would you give them?
Great question. And one of the reasons why I love events myself is because they play into emotional intelligence. So when you are connecting with people in person to tap into who they are as a person. So regardless of if you are business to business or if you're business to consumer, whatever your product is to hone in on that emotional intelligence, as I call it, and connect with people. And if that's an area that you want to focus in on, because that is such a huge part of why events themselves are so effective, is because you are connecting on that human to human. And so if I were to put it in one sentence, is I say, who are you talking to beyond their first name? And I have a whole segment on this, but what we're looking to do at events is, yes, first off, if we can remember their first name. A lot of people have some issues with that because you're meeting a lot of people, but how can we pre-qualify them either as a potential client or as a lead or as a strategy partner, or are they none of the above? And so what happens is when we're not paying attention to who we're talking to and we're assuming that they're all leads, right? And maybe you have a booth or working at a table at an expo, and we're treating all of them as the same person. As we all know, we're not all the same person. Then we're missing a lot of that opportunity. So having the practice and using events is a lot more than just your marketing strategies and a lot more than just tactics that, let's say, a digital marketer may use, is also really getting to know that human to human connection and how they are as a person. And then furthermore, how are they most likely to connect with you after you then qualify through your conversation is, well, who are they to my business? So one, who are they as a person, and really connect with them on that human level so that you can better connect with them how it relates to your business and your goals, and be able to qualify them, as I mentioned. Are they a lead? Are they a strategy partner? Are they someone that you look up to that you don't have to pitch them, and they never will become a client because they're not your ideal audience? And so those two factors of knowing who you're talking to beyond their first name is something that really is what makes events fun and different than your typical marketing strategy. But it also is something that makes it a little more complex, let's say, than just a marketing strategy that you can use.
Perfect. So speaking about connection, how can the audience connect with you?
Online, I am primarily on LinkedIn, so we can add that to the show notes. LinkedIn, YouTube. Every Tuesday at 1 p.m., I do a YouTube series. And then if they want to connect with me more so the entrepreneur and who I am, Michelle Nicole, behind the scenes, that's what I use Facebook and Instagram for. So if you're looking for event tips and how to optimize events, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and YouTube are the best resources. If you're looking to connect with me as an entrepreneur and who an event marketing strategist is behind the scenes, Facebook and Instagram.
Perfect. So, Michelle, this is the point in the Marketing Media Money podcast that we talk about strategy. And we've talked about strategy a lot in this podcast, but really here's where we have what I like to call the open mic portion of the show. So here is my question to you. What would be your number one marketing media or money strategy when hosting or sponsoring an event?
Going back to that connection and optimizing the connections that you're making. I like using that word, as we've noticed, optimizing. So it's not just about making connections, it's about optimizing. Going back to that tidbit a few moments ago of knowing who you're talking to beyond their first name. And if we can help master that part of it, that's also going to define the difference of an event strategy versus, let's say, digital strategy as well.
I love that. So you came bearing gifts, which I really love, and I'm sure everybody in the audience is thinking so too. And Michelle is going to share her event strategy blueprint workbook and the vault. And I have to tell you, I've already seen it, and it is a vault indeed, and you're really going to love it. So the link will be in the show notes, so make sure you go there and grab it. But could you tell us a little bit about it, Michelle?
Sure. So it is a vault. There is a lot of information, and the intention of this is because I have a lot of free content, whether it's on my Facebook group or YouTube. The vault is a place collectively that I share that content, so it's all in one location. The piece that we're sharing for today is what I call the 8 fundamentals in your event strategy. So these are the areas that I reference quite often, and I have that workbook. I have the resources all on the vault, and it's very easy to access. You can go through and have those chapters and have those worksheets to help you through that first foundation that we talked about, event strategy.
I love that. And one of the things I really loved about it too is that you shared with me earlier before the podcast that all of those foundations and strategies can actually be applied to other areas of their business too, and not just to events. So whether you've hosted an event, you've been a sponsor, an exhibitor, or maybe you're just considering it, this is something that you're going to want to keep. As I say, this is a keeper. And so I think that's really, really important. So thank you so much, Michelle, for being here with me today and for just so generously sharing your brilliance. I really appreciate it. And it was really fabulous to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm looking forward to hearing the other episodes of your podcast and being a part of your network.
Thank you so much. So for everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Make sure to join us on Facebook in the Marketing Media Money Magazine Podcast and Events Facebook group, and make it a phenomenal day. And if it's not, change it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Marketing, Media, and Money podcast. To shorten your learning curve even more, make sure to grab your free copy of the Marketing, Media, and Money magazine at www.marketingmediamoney.com. I promise your business will thank you.